From 1920 to 1969, flatheads and Harleys were the main force in American motorcycling. Until I met Candy, the only two things of value in my life were the 1946 flathead my father gave me and the 1917 Navy Luger my grandfather brought home after World War II. I wasn't what you would call an ambitious guy. I usually went with the flow and always took the easy way out. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't a weakling in any sense of the word, but I wasn't an outright bully either. I've interacted with a lot of friendly young ladies over the past few years, and I've usually been able to get one of them, who was better, to leave the bar before closing time. However, none of them interested me enough to make me want to start any kind of relationship until I went to Vegas. When I wasn't picking up girls in bars, I was beating my kidneys to death on the top of some digging equipment. It didn't take me long to become familiar with Caterpillar or their competitors' products. I had all the work I could handle, and the money was good. In no time at all, I was able to purchase a small house with a garage for my precious flathead. The Ford F-150 pickup was left outside in the rain, but my baby was left inside all alone. Grandpa's Luger was securely locked in his bedroom gun cabinet, along with a small collection of assorted rifles, shotguns, and bits of black powder. It was a nice little cottage, and I always brought my spoils there to complete my overnight affairs. My crash happened in mid-January. Work was progressing slowly, so a few friends and I took a special flight from Philadelphia to Vegas on a casino flight. I forgot the rule. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Candy was from somewhere south of Huntsville, but north of Birmingham. I couldn't remember the name of this place. I don't know if it was her blonde hair or her beautiful plastic breasts, but I fell in love with her at first sight. The main thing is that she made me feel like the most important person in the world. When I was with Candy, I felt beautiful, smart, and strong. I don't know if it was the booze or the neon lights, but I needed this woman. Without her, my collection would be incomplete. I came home with a new wife and a new tattoo. For the next few months, everything was great. The weather warmed up and Candy and I started riding every weekend. Of course, I spent more time maintaining the flathead than riding it, but that was the joy. I was just starting to feel comfortable with my new acquisition when things started to go wrong. The pig pen was not the best place for a woman like Candy, but I was confident in my ability to take care of her. I had been down this road several times and had a good idea of what to expect. I felt like we could have a good time if I kept my cool and was willing to walk away when things got really bad. For the first 2 hours, everything was fine, and then a problem appeared in the form of a hairy giant named Butter. Candy danced with Butter a few times, and I thought she was getting a little too friendly. Candy loved to flirt, but this was not the place for it. I tried to control my drinking and was still sober enough to know that there was no way in hell I could handle this monster if things got out of hand. It's time to leave. Candy was having a good time and didn't want to go home. In the end, I had to take her hand and carefully lead her out of the establishment. Of course, my loving wife complains all the time, loud enough for the entire bar to hear. We had just gotten to the truck when someone grabbed my arm. Okay, I know all these cliches. The first thing I noticed was the distorted voices coming from the speakers and the constant ding-ding sounds alerting people to this or that incident. All this was in place. Vomit green walls and fluorescent lamps. I was alone in this damn room, and I was in pain. Sunlight, penetrating through the window, told me it was daytime. That's when I remembered everything. Sometimes I am amazed at my own intelligence. I quickly came to the conclusion that I had done something stupid and ended up getting punched in the face. And I also wanted to go to the toilet. Using my superior deduction skills, I found the call button at the head of the bed. "Oh, I see you are already awake, Mr. Tyrell. It's nice to have you back in the real world. How are you feeling?" Nurse Gleason looked like a typical hospital worker straight out of a television sitcom. She wasn't old-fashioned, but she didn't try too hard to go the other way either. "I have a feeling that you will be very, very angry with me if I don't get the duck as soon as possible." My angel of mercy coped with her task as if she had done it 1,000 times before, and I am sure that it was so. Where the hell is my wife? She and her gentleman friend went home a few hours ago. We didn't expect you to wake up earlier than today. What kind of gentleman friend? She gave me a slightly curious look. A big guy who looks like a biker. Gentleman friend? He should be in jail. Why the hell does Candy go home or anywhere with him? 3 hours later, my loving wife appeared, accompanied by her boyfriend. Butter stood quietly in the doorway while I endured my wife's outpouring for almost 5 minutes. I really didn't hear a word she said. Finally, she stopped to catch her breath. What is he doing here? Why isn't he still in prison? And what are you doing with it? It was then that I realized that Candy's brain was not nearly as developed as her body. 3 questions in a row was more than she could handle. She was so caught up in apologizing for causing the problem that she didn't think of anything else. She stood upset. Let's start all over again. Why isn't he in jail? Butter avoided looking me in the eyes. Candy was finally able to string a few words together. The police said they couldn't arrest him until we pressed charges. They said you started the fight. What the hell do you mean? Yes, but he didn't know that I was your wife. Butter thought you pulled me out of the pigsty against my will. He tried to protect me from you. When he tried to stop you, you hit him. Is that what you told the police? Well, yes. It was the truth, and I couldn't lie to them. You mean he can get away with it? Couldn't you have at least charged him with excessive force? Candy just looked at me with a puzzled expression on her face and nodded. I'm sorry, dude. I didn't know she was your wife. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Butter seemed to feel obligated to explain his actions. How the hell are you going to make it up to me? I'm going to take care of you while you recover. You will be able to relax and come to your senses because I will be next to you. It was like a hellish nightmare. I don't want you to care about me or anything else. Please just get the hell out of my life. John, don't make such hasty decisions. Butter has already started helping. He drove your truck back to your house and called you at work to explain that you wouldn't be able to come to work for about 6 weeks. Was he in my house? I asked. Yes. In fact, he's going to live there until you get better. Isn't this prudent? No, that's not true. I want him out of my house and out of my life. Well, from that point on, everything seemed to go downhill. I was discharged from the hospital, but I was bedridden for at least 2 weeks and spent a month at home. Candy received a sheet with instructions on how to change the dressings and several prescriptions, mostly for pain medications. For the first couple of days, Candy gave me a lot of painkillers and sleeping pills. It was all a blur, but I remember that we laughed a lot. After a while, I realized that I needed to get my thoughts in order. Candy constantly came and fed me soup and pills. Butter just stood in the doorway and smiled. I started putting away all the pills I didn't swallow and started taking the high-dose Tylenol I had in my medicine cabinet because there were virtually no side effects. I could tell from the pill bottles next to the bed that Candy had given me more than double the dose of painkillers and sleeping pills. For most of the day and every evening, there was no sign of Candy or Butter. They returned staggering after midnight and whispered loudly to each other so as not to wake me. Of course, by this time my feelings had returned to normal, although my body had not yet. I spent days running through all possible scenarios in my head. Something needed to be done, but I had no idea what. When Candy and Butter were home, I acted as if I was still under the influence of drugs. They kept giving them to me, but later I spit them out. Candy and Butter had no idea that I could even function. It was about noon when Butter entered the room with a bowl of soup. I felt nauseous from eating soup all the time, but I didn't think that was a good reason to complain. I played dumb and saw him smirk slightly. Where is Candy? She does her hair and manicures. He put the soup on the bedside table. Are you going to leave soon, Butter? Why on earth would I want to leave? Well, I'm going to get better and thought you might want to get on with your life. This made Butter laugh. This is my life, bro. Why should I want to leave such an ideal environment? It's a great little house and your wife is great. The limit on your credit cards is incredible. I can go out with a beautiful woman every evening, and you pay for it all. If you think I'm going to give this up, You're out of your mind. What are you going to do when I feel better? Who said you'll get better? Eat your damn soup, weakling. Oh, by the way, Candy and I are going to Hershey's tomorrow for the bike show. We'll ride that cute little flathead you keep in the garage. Don't worry, I'll treat him right. He chuckled to himself as he left the room. This finally determined my decision. It's time to do something. Some time later, I heard his huge diesel truck with dual wheels driving away, what I assumed was to pick up my loving wife. I staggered out of bed and took the key to the gun cabinet. It was a wasted effort because the lock on the cabinet was broken. The situation was getting worse. The weapon disappeared, even powder guns. The worst thing was the absence of my precious Luger. All I had left were a few boxes of ammunition and 2 cans of black powder. Did they hide them from me or sell them? My trousers were hanging over the back of the chair. It's been over a week since I left the hospital, and she still hasn't washed them. I took out my wallet and started looking for my credit cards. Of course, they were all gone, as was my driver's license. Today, everything was going wrong. I went back to bed, finished my soup, and took a couple of Tylenols. I waited for Candy to bring me dinner. You don't look well, dear. What's happened? I don't think I'm getting better. I feel tired and nauseous all the time. Don't worry, John. Everything will be fine. Just keep taking your medications. There were 4 tablets on the food tray. You look beautiful. Have you done your hair? Yes, I'm glad you noticed. Butter is taking me to the pigsty tonight, and we'll go to Hershey's tomorrow. Should I bring you anything? No, do not need anything. We sat in silence for several minutes while I ate. Candy? Yes, John. What happened to my weapon? Oh, you noticed. Sorry, honey, but we ran into problems and had to sell them. What's the problem? Butter's truck had a transmission failure, and the mechanic agreed to take cash only. I know you don't approve of cash advances on credit cards, so we thought the best thing to do would be to sell the guns. You didn't use it anyway. Damn it, Candy. That Luger cost more than Butter's entire truck. Don't tell me you sold it. It wasn't worth as much as you thought, John. We took it to a guy named Tinfoot who knows all about guns and stuff. He said that it was so old that you couldn't even find cartridges for it. We were lucky to get $200. $200? It cost at least 10 times that amount. Oh, John, grow up. It was just an old gun. I'll buy you another one. Why are we paying to repair his truck? Because he's trying his best to help you. It's not his fault that you got hurt. What do you mean? He's the one who did it. You hit him first, John. Remember this. She seemed a little upset with me. Take your pills. Butter and I might be late tonight. Fridays are usually fun. Candy returned a couple of hours later to pick up the dinner tray. I didn't move. As far as she could tell, I fell asleep for the night. She was deliberately quiet so as not to wake me. 10 minutes later, the diesel engine drove off towards the pig pen. I figured I had about 6 hours to spare. By that time, I already knew which direction I should move and how much pressure I could withstand while remaining functional. It didn't matter because what needed to be done had to be done. I spent the first 30 minutes gathering all the necessary tools and parts. By the time I returned to the bedroom, I was completely exhausted. The beer helped calm me down a bit, but I was still nervous. I took a couple of sleeping pills and dozed off. The pills, like the beer, worked great. I woke up to the familiar sound of the engine starting and the sun's rays peeking through the window. I breathed a sigh of relief. Butter didn't turn on the flathead's headlights. Hobbled to the window, and after watching my precious flathead carry away my wife and enemy, hopefully for the last time, I decided to relieve myself. For some strange reason, I felt much better than before. I spent the rest of the day in front of the TV. Nothing happened until sunset. I ran out of beer pretty quickly, but in any case, it was time to switch to coffee. I wrapped my casted leg in a plastic bag and stood in the hot shower for a long time. I put on sweatpants and ordered Chinese breakfast. I promised the delivery guy a $20 tip if he brought a 6-pack of cold beer. It was almost midnight when I think I fell asleep during the Steven Seagal movie marathon. candy and butter never returned, and no one called or came to me all day. The next morning, I was awakened by continuous knocking on the door from 2 state police officers. "Mr. Tyrrell?" "Yes." "Are you Candace Tyrrell's husband?" he asked. "Yes." "Candy, there's someone here who wants to see you." There was no answer. "Yesterday, she went to Hershey's for a bike show. I expected her to return last night. I think she didn't come. Something happened." The 2 policemen looked at each other for a moment. They both reminded me of Marine drill sergeants. "I'm afraid your wife was seriously injured in an incident in the Hershey's parking lot." "How badly were you hurt? Was it an accident?" "You said incident." "Actually, sir, it was an accident. Your wife was riding a motorcycle with another man, and it exploded in the parking lot. The gentleman your wife was with died. Your wife suffered serious injuries and is being treated at the Hershey Burn Center. Fortunately, no one else was hurt." "How seriously is she injured?" "She'll be fine, won't she?" Patrolman number 1 just shook his head. "It was my motorcycle. Yesterday morning, when they left, it was working fine. What could cause a motorcycle in good condition to explode? We have assigned several people to look into this." "How well did you know Mr. Butterworth?" "Whom?" "Michael Butterworth. This is the man who was killed. He was with your wife. We met him just a few weeks ago. I didn't even know his real name. I knew him simply as Butter. Looks like Mr. Butterworth, there was a long line of enemies. There were many people who had a grudge against him. It will take some time to figure everything out. I would still like to know what condition my wife is in." "How seriously ill is she?" "At the moment, they are not sure whether she will survive or not." "Can she be transported?" "How can I see her in my condition? I showed them my leg. The best we can do is have someone contact you." Patrolman 1 was busy writing something down in a notepad. "Were any of you at the scene of the explosion?" "Yes, sir. We were both there." "I'm just wondering, what condition is the motorcycle in?" Patrolman 1 looked up from his clipboard. "The engine and transmission were intact, but everything else was scattered everywhere. Could you return the wreckage to me? For sentimental reasons, of course. I think this can be arranged. By the way, what's wrong with your leg?" The second policeman handed me a business card with his name and phone number. "Unpleasant little break. I've been housebound for 3 weeks now. If I hadn't broken my damn ankle, I'd be riding this bike." The 2 civil servants seemed satisfied with all the answers and stood up to leave. I don't think they were investigating anything, just notifying me of the incident. "Just curious, gentlemen, do any of you know an arms dealer named Tinfoot?" "Yes, he has a shop not far from Frada. Last year, we detained him for selling illegally modified AK-47 assault rifles. Are there any special reasons?" "No." Mr. Butterworth mentioned his name once. "Thanks for stopping by." Hidden in the depths of the freezer was an old lunch. I popped it in the microwave and made some new coffee. The first thing I needed to do tomorrow was make an appointment with the dentist. After that, I had to undergo an examination to remove the cast from my leg. I was going to be very busy for the next few months. Finding the parts I would need to restore the flathead would be task number 1. As soon as I'm in better shape, I'll go to Furtado talk to Mr. By-Tin Futon about my Luger. He won't be happy to see me. However, tomorrow I had to get in the truck and drive to Hershey's to see my loving wife. After a few phone calls, Butter's truck drove away, and I had $4,000 in my pocket. It wasn't much for a $20,000 truck, but the transaction went smoothly and without any questions asked. I ate out at the restaurant mainly because I wanted to make sure I could drive while wearing a cast. I was glad I chose the automatic transmission. The biggest problem was just getting in and out of the damn truck. This was the first time I cooked an entire batch of ribs myself. A healthy appetite must be a good sign. I had to wait until 9 o'clock the next morning to start making an appointment. I made a double appointment with the dentist the next morning and arranged for the cast to be removed that afternoon. It took me a full hour to alter a pair of good jeans so I could wear them over the cast. There was no way I was going to Hershey's wearing sweatpants. Candy didn't look good anymore. Mr. Pro-Tyrol, I am Dr. Dolot. I'm sorry about your wife's accident. I just stood there like an idiot and didn't say anything. Do you have any questions, Mr. Tyrol? I think no. Will she even be able to talk to me? How soon will she come to her senses? The doctor took me by the hand and sat me down. She's conscious now, but she's being given a strong sedative. I'm sorry to tell you this, but we have no hope for her recovery. We can keep her alive with a life support system. We see no chance of her ever leaving the hospital. We don't know how long she'll be conscious, so if you want to talk to her, you'd better do it now. I'm not a stupid doctor. You're recommending that I take her off life support, right? Yes, this is the most humane thing to do, but I cannot make this decision. Only you can. Could you leave me alone with her for a few minutes? Certainly. Diardola left, and I was left alone with my wife. I slowly pulled back the plastic to see her. I could tell she sensed someone was there. Butter? Is that you, Butter? Say something, baby. These were not the words I had hoped to hear. She was still clinging to that damn hairy monkey. I had an overwhelming urge to say it to her face and gloat about the situation, but I restrained myself. Her breathing was labored and uneven. She seemed to be twitching strangely. Around this time, one of the nurses came in and looked at the monitors with concern. Dr. Dolet came back and asked me to leave the room. After a few moments, the doctor came out and shook his head. I'm very sorry, Mr. Tyrol, but there is no more hope. So, they turned off my wife's life support, and by the time I was done with all the paperwork, she was dead. The hospital arranged for her to be cremated. 3 days later, I received the death certificate and a small cardboard box containing her ashes. I was still receiving workers' compensation. They didn't want me to go back to work until I was fully recovered. Luckily, I insured the Flathead as a classic model. The insurance company refused to provide me with anything until the investigation into the explosion was completed. However, they delivered the remaining parts to me. Of course, it cost me over $1,000. I got rid of any evidence I might have left in the garage. I think a good investigator might have dug up something, but they didn't seem interested. There was no doubt that the motorcycle had been blown up by a bomb. Since they couldn't pin it on me, I was finally able to collect the money. All the motorcycle parts were laid out on the garage floor, similar to the photos seen after the crash. It took some time to inventory and evaluate. About 20% of the parts were missing, and about 50% of what I had was too damaged to be used. I had to assume the engine and transmission were intact, but I had my fingers crossed. Steam cleaning and testing showed that everything went satisfactorily. The frame was completely broken. I had to return to work in 2 weeks. All of Candy's things were collected and donated to the charitable foundation. For some reason, she left her purse at home when she went to the bike show. Her Alabama driver's license says she lived in a place called Bose. A map search showed it was about an hour south of Huntsville. Luckily, the new frame I needed was in Chattanooga. It would have been easier to just mail it, but I quickly decided I needed to take a road trip. I decided to pick up the frame in Tennessee and then head to Bose to deliver Candy's ashes to her family. Don't ask me why I wanted to do this because I don't have a good answer. Somehow, it just felt right to me. The next morning, things took a strange turn. Before I got ready to leave, the 2 friendly policemen showed up again. Are you going on a trip, Mr. Tyrol? This was not a good omen. I need to buy a new motorcycle frame in Tennessee. I'll only be gone for a few days. Is it important? No, not at all. We just happened to be nearby and decided to give you the latest news. About what? About the incident that resulted in the death of your wife. The explosion was caused by C4 explosives, which were activated by a remote device. Federal authorities have been able to get a pretty good handle on everything, but they still don't have a suspect. Where the hell did someone get C4 explosives? They both just shrugged. I thanked them for stopping by to see me. 10 minutes later, I was on my way. In about 10 hours, I'll have a new frame. Tomorrow, early in the morning, I will go to Bose to meet my in-laws. All I could think about the whole way was who the hell blew up my wife and why. What happened to my 4 perfect little pipe bombs? I knew damn well the feds wouldn't mistake a black powder explosion for a C4 explosive. Someone must have really had a grudge against old Butter. I tried to mentally change the topic, but I kept coming back to the same thing. I finally convinced myself that whoever did this was after Butter and Candy was collateral damage. It was too big a coincidence to happen by chance. Someone must have planned this. It was a long trip. The drive through Virginia on Highway 81 seemed to take forever. Things started to clear up when I noticed the crystal billboards. There are actually no billboards in Virginia, but they do list food establishments on interstate highway exits. I think that's why I decided to go on a trip. I was wondering how many sliders a man could eat in 3 days. Maybe I'll find out. The flathead frame cost me almost $800, but it came with a nice VIN number. It's difficult to get a new registration without a good identification number. This would make repairs much easier. I left Chattanooga as soon as it got dark and didn't stop until I crossed the Alabama state line. I took the frame with me into the room. I didn't come all this way just to lose her in a motel parking lot. I had breakfast south of Huntsville. The navigator pinpointed the address listed on Candy's driver's license. For some strange reason, I kept her ashes on the seat next to me. I even found myself talking to her a few times. I had no plans and had no idea what I was going to do. I was humming Sweet Home Alabama when a house came into view. I was hoping for a house, but I was expecting a mobile home. As I got out of the truck, I picked up Candy. There was no one around, but the front door was open and a red Jeep was parked in the driveway. At least there wasn't a pit bull on the porch. No one opened the door, so I walked around the back of the house. She saw me before I saw her. "How can I help you, mister?" I didn't expect this. I found myself face to face with a tall, very pregnant, red-haired woman. Her hair was not red, but some kind of chestnut shade and went down below her shoulders. She was barefoot, wearing a t-shirt and overalls. She stopped hanging out the laundry and waited for an answer. "Is this Candy Selman's house?" "Yes, but she's not here. May I help you?" I didn't know how to approach the topic of her death. I stood there like an idiot and held the box of ashes in front of me. She didn't move, but just stood there with her hand on her hip. I couldn't tell from the look on her face whether she was unhappy or relieved. It was obvious that she recognized what the cardboard box was. As she looked at her, my mind began to wander. I kept playing the video for Redneck Woman in my head. It was like the music video came to life. I expected an ATV to appear over the hill behind the mobile home at any moment. My thoughts were interrupted by the hostess's voice. "What are you smiling at, mister? It's not funny." "I'm sorry. I didn't want to take the situation lightly. Just seeing you reminded me of the Gretchen Wilson video." The red-haired beauty took a quick glance at herself. I saw a slight smile on her face as she answered, "Sorry. If I knew you were coming, I would have worn a bra." We stood in silence for several seconds. I think we were both a little embarrassed. She was the first to decide to break the ice. "Would you like to come in for coffee or something?" I simply nodded and followed her into the house. "Put it on the coffee table. I don't want this box on the table where we eat." One way or another, she guessed that Candy's ashes were in the box. I never told her about it, and she never asked. She placed a mug of coffee in front of me, but offered me no cream or sugar. It didn't matter because I don't use them anyway. "What's your name, mister, and how did you get Candy's remains?" John Tyrrell. The crematorium didn't know what to do with her ashes, so I ended up taking them." "Well, Randy will be glad you brought him. By the way, where did you come from?" "Pennsylvania. Candy was in an accident near Hershey. This is the place where they make chocolate bars." I took a sip of coffee. It was almost espresso, but tasty. "Who is Randy?" "Randy is my brother, and he is also Candy's husband." The cough I suddenly made at this statement gave me away completely. "You didn't know she was married, did you?" "In no case." Another moment of awkward silence followed. With this new information, I had nothing to say. Her name was on the death certificate. Candy Tyrell. It was difficult for me to explain. Where is Randy now? How can I contact him? He'll be here in about an hour. You can make yourself more comfortable. By the way, my name is Rachel. Rachel Evans. Would you like more coffee or something stronger? Is there anything stronger? This made me laugh. Are you laughing at my coffee? Maybe a little bit. I think I'll like it over time. Wow. Are you planning to stay? I don't think Mr. Evans would approve. Well, that sounded like crap in a punch bowl. Rachel suddenly fell silent. She poured me more coffee and left the room without saying anything. It was easy to understand that any mention of her husband would not be received favorably. I sat silently with a cup of fresh coffee. I looked at Candy and mentally asked what I did wrong. Of course, I didn't receive an answer. A few minutes later, Rachel returned. She was wearing a loose flannel shirt and black maternity pants. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail at the back of her head, and her bangs were swept straight in front, just above her eyes. I noticed that she was wearing very little makeup, which she didn't have before. This was better, but it wasn't really necessary. Since you're going to be here for a while, I thought I'd better put on a bra. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. Damn it. You're just trying to make me feel bad. I thought you looked good before you changed your clothes. Rachel poured herself more coffee and sat down next to me. Could you tell me how you met my wayward daughter-in-law? I would prefer not to do this. I'm a little uneasy about this whole situation right now. That's because you didn't know she was married, right? Perhaps so. If I had known, I wouldn't be here today. Rachel sighed sadly. If it weren't you, it would be someone else. This girl was on a path to destruction. I understand that you didn't like her. Oh, hell no. I loved Candy. We grew up together. I was delighted when she married my brother. I was her maid of honor. Candy and I were best friends. What was their marriage like? Heavy. It took her less than a year to start cheating on Randy. The problem was that he always found out about it. So that's why she left. Almost so. Where did you meet her? In Vegas. Oh shit. Doesn't sound very good. I thought about the whole situation and decided that I shouldn't linger here. Rachel, I appreciate your hospitality, but I have a long trip ahead of me to get home. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet Randy, but I'm sure you can explain everything to him for me. When I started to get up, I heard the voice of Candy's real husband. What should I explain? I didn't even notice him come through the door. Randy Evans wasn't much taller than me, but he was really wiry. It was immediately obvious that this was Rachel's brother. I didn't want to anger this man. Randy, this is Mr. Tyrell. He came by to take the leftovers to Candy. She nodded towards the box on the coffee table. Do you have fresh coffee? That was all she heard from her brother as he passed us both. I felt like I was in a bad movie. I didn't know whether to sit down or stay standing. What I really wanted was to get out the door. After filling his glass, Randy sank into the leather deep chair that occupied the centerpiece of the room. Sorry about your bike, dude. Rachel set her cup down on the kitchen table. If you guys will excuse me, I need to hang up some laundry. She was able to understand the situation and decided that it was better to leave us alone. As soon as he made his statement, I realized that there was a lot going on that I knew nothing about. How did he know about my motorcycle? I felt that he was waiting for an answer, but I didn't have one. I thought that Flathead belonged to that big guy who was with my wife. It was only later that I realized what the story really was. You know who I am? Now I know, but I didn't know a month ago. I sat with my elbows on my knees and looked at the floor. Do you have beer? Randy chuckled softly and climbed out of the chair. A few moments later, I had a cold bud in my hand. It wasn't your fault, dude. I realized that you didn't know. I also made inquiries and found out how she set you up. She was a mean bitch, but I loved her. What do you mean, set me up? Well, I don't think she planned it or anything, but she took advantage of the opportunity. She was good at it. I finished my beer and leaned back on the couch. Damn it, I feel so worthless. I never thought it would turn out this way. None of them did this. Rachel returned with a laundry basket on her hip. In a couple of months, it will be a baby. I found myself a little jealous of the lucky guy who would be sharing her bed. Rachel, expensive. Could you make us some grilled cheese sandwiches? I didn't have breakfast. It was a little early for lunch, but I couldn't refuse. Where did you get this frame in the back of the truck? Chattanooga. I was lucky enough to find a frame with a good number. Do you need any more spare parts? Anything specific? Why are you asking? Do you have anything hidden in your backyard? Not in my backyard, but about 15 kilometers from here, I have a good friend with a couple of homeless bikes that are looking for a new home. We can go there if you want. I feel like I owe you for all the trouble I caused. You to nothing you shouldn't, Randy. It was I who set you up. I don't want you to feel obligated to me. I appreciate your suggestion, but don't do it because you feel like you did something wrong. I crashed your motorcycle, boy. He was wonderful, and now I know you didn't deserve it. Aren't you mad at me for being with your wife? I'm upset about what happened, but it's not your fault. You didn't know you were being deceived. If you knew she was married, would you sleep with her? I simply shook my head no when Rachel announced that lunch was ready. Randy noticed me looking at his sister while we were having lunch. I didn't stare at her, but I took the opportunity to admire it all. At the table, we switched from beer to sweet tea. I prefer savory, but drank what was served to be accommodating. After lunch, Randy and I drove to Gadsden. Given the current situation, I was relieved that everything went as well as it did. I ended up with a truckload of parts that would have taken me months to find online. I had no idea how much they cost because Randy picked up the tab. Before we got home, Randy began the third-degree interrogation. John, you seem to have been keeping a very close eye on my sister. What's going on with you? I think it's your fault, Randy. Beautiful women seem to flock to you. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. She's pregnant, John. Did you notice this? This is the first thing I saw. Her husband is undoubtedly a lucky man. Randy was looking out the window, and I barely heard him. He is dead. He died in an Army helicopter crash about 6 months ago. Oh shit. I'm sorry. Was it Iraq or Afghanistan? Neither one nor the other. Fort Campbell, Kentucky. He didn't even go abroad. At least I understood why she seemed upset when I mentioned my husband earlier. What is she going to do? Well, she will stay with me until the baby is born. Beyond that, I have no idea. I needed someone to take care of the house since Candy left, so it worked out for both of us. Before we got back to the house, I stopped and grabbed a tarp to tie my gifts to. Out of sight, out of mind. I couldn't help but think about Rachel and her problem. Randy and I spent the rest of the day drinking beer. He learned about my situation when he first walked into the pigsty. I don't know how he ended up there. Candy and Butter were having a lot of fun at the bar, joking about how I was being cuckolded and how there was nothing I could do about it. I never asked him what he did to avoid being recognized when he was there. Randy's original plan was to blow up Butter's truck outside the house, but when he learned about the Hershey bike show, the plan changed. He had no idea that I had a similar idea. He took away my pathetic homemade bombs, as he called them, and replaced them with C4. That's when he realized that I wasn't sitting idly by like a weakling. I have no idea how he tracked Candy down, and I didn't want to ask. I have no idea where or how he got the C4 and didn't want to ask. The less I knew, the better. Rachel went out several times to bring fresh beer and pick up empty bottles. She was absolutely delighted when I invited them to dinner. When we got back, it was late, and I ended up staying with Randy. In fact, I spent the next 3 nights at Randy's. The drive back to Pennsylvania was much more fun than the previous trip. The biggest challenge was stopping at all the rest stops along the way so Rachel could pee. I had no idea pregnant women had such small bladders. Less than 2 months later, Rachel gave birth to an adorable baby girl. Don't ask me why, but we named her Candy. Hopefully, I can get Flathead in order before she has her first birthday. I tried to get Randy to come and visit me, but he just laughed. I think he's avoiding Pennsylvania for some reason. Next week, I'm going to talk to Mr. by Tin Futon about my Luger. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.